Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com, on Roku, Dwyer Boxing and Sports News. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. It's been a few days, let's get after it. First, let's talk about a fight I was wrong about. Right? Malik Scott versus Tony Thompson. I thought Tony Thompson would catch up with Malik Scott. I viewed Malik Scott as a guy in his mid-30s who's fighting the wrong style for a guy in his mid-30s. Typically, guys slow down a little bit. As they say in boxing, the legs are the first to go. You really can't fight a young Ali / Larry Donald style, in my opinion, at heavyweight and expect to survive. Right? I saw Deontay Wilder catch up to Malik Scott relatively early in their bout. I thought Tony Thompson would make the ring smaller and smaller and smaller as this fight went along. I thought Thompson was going to catch him. I thought that was going to be game over. Also, if you look at Thompson's fights against Adlanir Solis, Thompson actually looked like he knew how to fight with decent foot speed, even in his 40s. Right? Thompson was much faster afoot than Adlanir Solis. I thought Thompson had enough foot speed to catch up with Malik Scott. He didn't. I was wrong. He did have a brief moment where he knocked Scott down, but that was a brief moment. Malik Scott was not in danger of being stopped. Malik Scott, in fact, dominated the fight pretty much from the opening bell, with the exception of when he gets decked. Tony just lacked the foot speed to keep up. Scott used lateral movement. In fact, if you're a skeptic on the value of great lateral movement, the importance of lateral movement in the ring, especially against a guy who's a very tough player at the chessboard, right? Understand, Tony's big, right? He has reach, and he's a southpaw, and he throws with power, right? But Malik Scott nullified all of that with spectacular lateral movement, right? I congratulate Malik Scott. Masterful performance. Let me say, too, that privately, I think I might have said so here online, too. I consider Tony Thompson to be America's best heavyweight. I made the statement in a landscape with names like Malik Scott, Deontay Wilder, Brian Jennings. I made the statement that someone would have to beat Tony Thompson for me to crown them America's best heavyweight. Well, Malik Scott has done that, right? It clouds the picture, quite frankly, because Scott looks so bad against Deontay Wilder, right? So let's just say in the United States, the heavyweight division is a little bit cloudy, but I am going to say that Malik Scott did beat the man I consider to be the best in the division in the United States, right? Let me go one step further. There's a fight coming up. We'll get into it in another video. Brian Jennings, right? A guy you need to keep close track of, right? And he's fighting Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz is unbeaten. I'm expecting Brian Jennings to win that match. All Jennings has to do, because that's another opponent who's very clever up close. All Jennings has to do is use the kind of lateral movement that Malik Scott used in this fight and that Jennings himself used in going the distance against Vladimir Klitschko. So in that fight against an unbeaten opponent, I'm leaning Brian Jennings. Let me also say this too. This Malik Scott-Tony Thompson fight is kind of like how I see the Miguel Cotto-Saul Alvarez fight going. Now, I was recently on boxingscene.com, and I noticed they have a new format. So they have a pound-for-pound category, and I thought, okay, let me see who they have on the pound-for-pound category. Now, understand, we all have opinions in boxing, right? No one's right until the fights actually happen and we see who actually wins the fight. I noticed that on boxrec.com, a great site, they have Saul out incredibly number 3 on the pound list. The only guys that are above him are Triple G, Gennady Golovkin, and the heavyweight champion, Vladimir Klitschko. Now, all I'm saying to you is this. I expect Cotto to win that fight because Cotto has the superior lateral movement. Cotto's going to be moving around the ring. I think Canelo is going to look as wooden-footed, as stiff-legged, as Tony Thompson did against Malik Scott. And keep in mind, Malik Scott's flashing a jab and moving around the ring. With Cotto, Cotto's going to ambush you. He's going to jump in with power shots. It's a different dynamic, right? I personally feel Cotto has a chance at a stoppage. Let me also say, too, that I strongly recommend, and I mean strongly recommend, that you go to boxrec.com and look at their pound-for-pound list because, quite frankly, it's astonishing. It's very far from what I would put together as a pound-for-pound list. The top name here is Vladimir Klitschko. Folks, I believe Vladimir Klitschko loses his title against Tyson Fury. Right? They have, in the same weight class, and we'll get into this in another video, they have Keith Thurman ranked number 8. They have Sean Porter ranked number 14. Well, those two guys are going to meet in the ring. I like Sean Porter in that fight. We'll talk about that another time. Let's also talk about just some things happening in boxing. Now, there's a long time debate, right? This debate's been going on forever. It predates me, right? I've been in barbershops where men older than me, guys not on this phone call that I'm going to ignore, but men older than me have debated this. And the question is, does the title make the man? Or does the man make the title? Right? This is a long time boxing debate. And just understand that guys like Abel Sanchez, in talking about now former champions like David Lemieux, who fought against his fighter Triple G, have made the argument that fighters, before they have titles, don't really have anything to fight for. Right? They're fighting for themselves and stuff, but there's not a bigger purpose, right, other than their own success and their own legacy. Suddenly, a guy gets a title, and he has a responsibility, right? Maybe the guy didn't do all the road work before. Maybe he, was a little bit casual. Maybe that late night, was a little bit later than it should have been for a professional athlete, right? Maybe the athlete, between fights, hit the pub, enjoyed a pint, etc. But Triple G's trainer, Abel Sanchez, believes that that all changes for a lot of guys when they get the title. Suddenly, you're not just Joe Smo. Suddenly, you're Joe Smo world champion. Right? Suddenly, it's not just about your career. It's actually about your division and your responsibility to let other guys know how it's done. Right? So you have the group out there that believes the title makes the man. Then you have the other group. Right? I belong in the other group. Right? For me, look, I'll put it this way. You're not the heavyweight champion of the world, in my opinion, until you beat Vladimir Klitschko. I don't care what belt you're wearing around your waist. I don't care what some sanctioning body says. Right? You know, I saw a fight one time. It was Marco Antonio Barrera when he was in his prime, when he was a bad man. And he was fighting the champion in his weight class. Right? So you know the rest. Barrera, of course, had bad blood with the sanctioning body. Barrera didn't like where he was ranked and all this other stuff historically. So you know the rest. Barrera beats the champ. And at the end of the fight, they had belts that they carried over to Barrera's corner to give to him because he had just beaten the champ. In other words, he was the champ now. And Barrera waved them off. Waved them off. Right? Because for Marco Antonio Barrera, beating the champ was enough. He didn't want the politics that came with the belt. He didn't want to be told who to fight and when to fight. Right? I'll give you another example. Riddick Bowe once held a press conference. Had a belt on his shoulder. And he said, "Hi, I'm Riddick Bowe, heavyweight champion. And today I'm withdrawing my recognition of whatever title he had." And he took the belt off his shoulder and literally threw it in the garbage. Now, the reason I bring all of this up is, you know, in terms of the best fighters pound for pound, certainly if you were to talk about the best defensive fighters, just defense in boxing, one of the names that really has to be on your list is unbeaten. Let me repeat that. Unbeaten. Guillermo Rigondeaux. Now, look, I understand the other side of the argument well. If you're a champ, you have to defend your title. Right? We're not going to say, "Hey, you're the champ," and then allow you to just stay out of the ring forever. Right? That doesn't work. Right? So, Guillermo Rigondeaux hasn't defended his title enough. Right? So they have taken his title away from him. I think they're calling him now a champion in recess. Understand, though, that Rigondeaux is gonna, and I understand many of you pronounce it Rigondeaux. Okay, fine. Rigondeaux is going to haunt his division. Right? Whoever has the belt in his division is going to want to fight him. Right? I'll put it another way. If Carl Froch were to come back today, right, and let's say he doesn't have a belt because he's been retired, I'm just telling you that the champions at 168 pounds are going to know that they need to fight Carl Froch. They're just going to know it. Right? Because they're going to understand that whatever their sanctioning body is telling them, whatever the belt around their waist says, there are going to be many people out there saying, "Gee, can this guy beat Carl Froch?" Right? The question is going to be asked. Well, let me say this. Guillermo Rigondeaux, understand he's reached a point in the public imagination where, whether or not he's box office, we know how good he is. Right? So they've stripped him. Other guys are going to get an opportunity, and quite frankly, that's the way it should be, as I see it. Right? If you're not going to defend the belt, let's give contenders who have made this their craft an opportunity. But don't kid yourself. Rigondeaux's not out of the title hunt. He's always in the title hunt. Understand, when you're among the very best, when you're unbeaten, when fight fans are watching a fight and they're saying, "Man, you know, this guy's defense isn't as good as Guillermo Rigondeaux's." Right? When you're asking those questions, when you're sitting around saying, "Man, let me see how good defense is," and then you're putting on tapes of Rigondeaux and he's still unbeaten and he's still available for fights, don't kid yourself. Promoters know who the guy is. The fighters know who the guy is. Sometimes, too, and folks need to figure this out, you get paid for not fighting. In other words, I'm the champ. The number one contender or the number two contender isn't a big name. The public's not in love with them. No one's, knocking on my door begging for that fight. I might say, you know what? I'm going to stay on the side of the road here. People know who I am. Go ahead and strip me of my title. Right? People know who I am. Leo Santa Cruz understands that there are people out there who feel he's been avoiding me. Right? The public understands that I'm ready to fight anybody at the right price. It is prize fighting. The amount of the prize matters. Understand, a lot of these guys are willing to fight anybody. But then they hear that you want them to fight for less than $100,000 or less than half the money they could get fighting other guys. And people are going to say, hey, you know what? Count me out. Right? That's the way boxing goes. So I've gotten some emails from many of you saying, hey, what are they doing to Rigondio? We know the powers that be in boxing are delusional. Understand, though, the real power rests with you, the fans. We know who Rigondio is. Right? You know the way boxing is. You've seen the Rocky movie. Rocky 3, I think it is, where Rocky's giving a press conference and Clubber Lang shows up. Mr. T, and starts yelling at him. That's the history of boxing. When are you going to give me a shot? Why are you avoiding me? Remember me? I'm still here. I'm ready to fight you. You remember David Haye showing up to the Vladimir Klitschko Eric Chisora post-fight press conference and yelling, hey, when are you going to fight me? I'm right here. Why look for somebody else? I'm here. I'll deliver box office. Give me a shot. Right? Understand, in boxing, when guys are avoided and the public knows the guy's a high-quality guy, that guy becomes a ghost haunting everything. Let me go one step further. I believe you have some boxers who are so consumed with being their best, who want to be the best, who need to know whether they're the best, that these guys will actually look out for the ghosts haunting their division, and they'll call them out. Right? And so the bottom line is, Miguel Cotto, as successful as he has been, as wealthy as he has been, right? Keep in mind, an argument can be made that Miguel Cotto, for years now, really, has been a guy worthy of the Boxing Hall of Fame. But you understood that Cotto needed to fight Floyd Mayweather. Not for the money, although I'm sure the money was good, but because Cotto understood, in this weight class, this guy is the ghost. He's the standard. Now, I know their fight was for a title. I'm telling you, if neither guy had a title, I get the feeling they would end up in the ring together. Because guys looking for legacy and guys who need to know, I believe Canelo is the same personality type, right? I have no doubt that Canelo ends up in the ring if he beats Cotto, right? I'm picking Cotto in that fight, but if Canelo beats Cotto, I have no doubt that Canelo is going to end up in the ring with Gennady Golovkin, right? Not at 154, but at 160. Why? Because I believe Canelo needs to know, right? It's not about, paper titles and stuff. Don't get me wrong. Golovkin has a middleweight title. Hey, you know what? That's nice too. But you and I know if they strip Golovkin, Canelo would still want to fight him. Not every fighter's like this. A lot of guys are interested in paydays and stuff like that, right? I'm just telling you, the personality type is out there. It's rampant in the sport, right? I noticed John Pascal has been calling out Adonis Stevenson, right? Because Pascal, simply put, needs to know. He's already fought Kovalev, right? Stevenson's out there, right? Pascal could easily make big money fighting other names, But Adonis Stevenson is the guy he needs to know about. Right? So, someone is going to need to know about Guillermo Burgundio. Let me say this too. I heard Leo Santa Cruz might voluntarily relinquish his title. I'm telling you, someone is going to need to know about Leo Santa Cruz. These guys remain in the mix. It's very hard to fool the boxing public, as I like to say. If you're in a bar and your back is to the door and someone walks in and they say, hey, the heavyweight champion of the world walked in, I'm telling you 90% of you, without turning around, would intuitively think Vladimir Klitschko has just walked in the bar. Right? You're not going to mess around with Deontay Wilder or anybody else holding any other belt. Right? You know, too, when they say world heavyweight champion, they're not talking about some intercontinental belt. Right? They're not talking about some regional belt. Right? You know they're talking about a major belt, and you know who has just walked in the bar. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. If you have thoughts on whether the title makes the man or whether the man makes the title, I hope you share those thoughts in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.